come on in. We're going to talk about pocket knives. Alrighty, I have this case of Stockman that was sent in. It's a good knife, beautiful knife. I love the bone on this. It's got just the right amount of wear to make it gorgeous. You know, a brand new knife just doesn't have that look. But anyway, love the knife. It's been well used. It has a punch blade here, which at first I thought that was a blade that was just worn down, but it's obviously made to be a punch from the design. Those have great snap, but the main blade has very weak snap. When I look at it, the tang is worn down, so we're going to take a look at that and repair it for him. I attempted to drill out the pins on this knife, but he didn't want to move, so I didn't want to hammer on them very hard, so instead I gave up on this plan. I decided to go ahead and cut the pins with a razor blade instead. I only cut the center pin and the pivot for the main because I only need to remove this one blade. I left the other side alone. Next, I'll drill out the pins that I cut earlier. It's much easier to do when you can work on each side of the liner rather than just each side of the knife. Now, this takes a little longer than I expected, as I'm trying to be extra careful to not hammer on this knife any more than I just have to. So here on the main blade, I'm measuring from the center of the hole to the edge of the blade and marking a center line. It's difficult to find the exact center of the hole, so I scribe a line on each side. Then I know that the exact center is between those two lines. Just to double check my measurements, I'm comparing the tang of the main blade to that of the secondary blade, which was relatively unworn. This is just an extra step to try to verify that my measurements are accurate and that the two tangs will be as identical as possible when I'm finished. I check them by holding the two together and by measuring with the calipers as well. In order to reform and reshape this tang, or as I like to call it, moving the hole, I have to peen a steel pin into the old pivot hole to fill it up. I have to peen it enough that the plug of metal is jammed into place and it will not move or fall out, but at the same time it can't be too tight or it can crack the tang of the blade. Ask me how I know that.
I'll use a worn 180 grit belt to sand that plug flat. Often you just can't see where the pin is after sanding it, and that's my goal. Now mark the new location for the hole, comparing the measurements from the secondary blade. I will also double check, or at this point is it triple check? Anyway, I'll double check the location for the correct center of that hole. I'm having trouble drilling through this tang with this drill bit. I think it's become dull. So after trying, I go back to the starter bit again. These blades are thin and the starter bit will drill all of the way through it. Then I can go back with this bit and ream that hole out to the exact correct diameter. It makes me a little nervous to drill through a blade. There's the very real likelihood that the bit will stick just as it goes through the far side and spin that knife blade like a lawnmower blade. Now I do my best to slow the drill down and be ready to move my fingers in a flash. This drill bit was catching badly enough that I eventually locked the blade in my small vise to hold it safely and to protect my fingers. I mean, let's be honest, these are very beautiful fingers, and besides, my mama gave them to me, so I really want to take care of them. Here's a close-up where you can see the pivot hole and where it used to be. Now, in the very next step, what I'll have to do is take a similar amount of material off the back side of the tang, comparing the distance that I've moved that hole. You see, since I've effectively shortened the blade, I also have to shorten where the spring meets the back of that blade. But my camera moved and I missed all of that shot. Sorry about that. At this point of the process, I'm ready to do a test fit just to see how everything looks. I use pins that are a bit too small to make it easy to insert and remove them by hand. I like the blade alignment, so I think I'm ready to put this knife together for real. Now this pin I have is just a few thousandths of an inch oversized, so I'm going to turn it down on the belt sander really quickly. As you've probably seen me do before, I'm using the vise to compress the back springs and remove the tension from them so I can insert the center pin. Now this one works so well I could have pushed that pin in by hand, except the end of it is sharp where I'd previously cut it, and so I used some pliers again to protect these fingers. And the snap has been restored to that blade, but now our blade sits a little bit proud. Filing down the kick of the blade will allow it to sit deeper into the blade well, but you have to be careful. It's easy to remove too much. It's kind of like Brill cream. A little dab will do you. I'm taking longer to peen this pin than I normally do because I'm using more gentle taps of the hammer. You see, the last knife that I worked on, a customer's knife, I broke the handle, and that was earlier this same morning. So I'm teaching myself to be a bit more cautious again, slow down and do it right. Now I'm using a 7/1000th of an inch feeler gauge as a slackener. This helps me to peen that pin to the correct tension. See, I really need to cut a slot in the end of it so it sits around the pin, but for now I'm sliding it in between the blade and the bolster. You'll see me check the snap of the blades and the side-to-side wobble as I go to be sure that I don't leave that blade too loose, but also not too tight, and know just when to stop peening it. I use a 400 grit belt to sand the pins down on the bolsters. I used to start with a more coarse grit and then move up to the 400, but today I just feel like being patient and taking my time with it. Besides, it sometimes takes more work to remove the scratches from the coarse grit than it does to just use a 400 grit at the beginning. And it doesn't take too much to polish up this knife. I'll polish both bolsters, though I only took one side apart. Once that's done, I'll touch up the bone handles, especially around that center pin, and then do a brief touch up on the rest of the knife. But the blades look great and don't need to be polished at all. So here we are, guys. I think this one turned out gorgeous, if I have to say so myself. A beautiful knife. The small blade on this is a punch blade. The model is a 6318 PU, and the PU references it having a punch blade. That threw me off at first because I didn't notice the PU part of the model number. Yeah, gorgeous knife. I love the way it looks. The bone handles on this are just, they glow in the light. I really love the bone handles on this one. When you look at it, you see, there's been a little wear. This is a used knife and actually adds to the character, in my opinion. And on the back scale, you have this variation in color that you don't have on the front. You have lighter spots here because bone is an organic material. It's not the same density all throughout. So where it's more dense, less dye will soak in. And over here you have darker color where it was less dense and more of the dye soaked in. But all in all, just a beautiful knife. I don't know, there's something about a good used knife that already has elegant designs that I love. Now on this small spade blade, the opening snap is great, but the closing snap is a little bit weak. I worked with that a little bit, got it better after I had finished everything else on the knife, but it's not quite perfect. Probably because the pin was pinned a little too hard. Not that there's too much tension, but the pin swelled more. But now the main blade, this one has very strong pull now. In fact, probably a little more than I'm comfortable with. I hurt my thumb there. But we'll open this blade up, and terrific snap. And I know you can't hear that. I'll explain why in a minute. But terrific opening snap, terrific closing snap. This thing is like an alligator snap. Yeah, we got the snap restored. If anything, we have a little too much, but I'm hoping, given a little time, that will settle in and become a little more easier to use. But in this case, I have trouble sometimes opening it with my right hand. Even though I'm right-handed, my left thumbnail is thicker than my right thumbnail. So when it's very difficult to open it with my left hand because it tends to not tear my thumbnail off. Here we go. Try it again. And yeah, I just couldn't get it. So we'll get it left-handed. And like I said, very strong pull on this one. It's a 9 or a 10 on that subjective scale that no one can ever agree on. But yeah, turned out good. I think the owner will be happy with it. Certainly better than that weak snap on that blade. Now, I'll take a moment here and let all of you know, when I recorded this section, I found out later my microphone did not work. So my hand gestures are not going to match my voice because I can't remember exactly what I said, exactly when I said it. So I'm going to give you the same information, but you may get it kind of a different part of this video because by the time I had realized that, the knife was already packaged back up. I was getting ready to ship it back to the owner, and I was not going to undo all of that. In fact, it was kind of difficult to ship this one back because this is a beautiful knife. I'll be honest with you. I don't believe in coveting things or keeping something that belongs to somebody else. But if there was ever a knife that was just so beautiful to me, it was hard to send back. This is one of them. So I'll point out something about the pins here in a moment that didn't come out just perfect. And again, I try to be honest and show the flaws on a knife just as I do the good things about it. But the color of the bolster or the pin right there, it doesn't match exactly. Now, it was a silver nickel pin. I know sometimes I've gotten my steel pins mixed up with my silver nickel, but this one was a silver nickel pin, but the color just doesn't match the bolsters. It's a different recipe of metal. And as I keep turning it there in the light, every now and then you can see that pin. So it's smooth. It's not like I've got a ring showing around it, but the color just doesn't match. Nothing I can do about that. Out of 3 or 4 pieces of pin stock, some of it will match and some won't, because again, slightly different recipes of the material. Now on the back side here, the back bolster, you can see a little dimple on that side. Not on the back, but just on the front of that end bolster. When I opened this knife up, I did not take that side apart. But as I kind of open, or I'd say like opening a book, or pivoted the parts of the knife on that side, it turned the pin. And since the bolsters are not flat, it left a little dimple there. I sanded it out on the back side of the knife, the pile side, but on the mark side, I would have had to remove too much metal. So it's got a little bit of a dimple there. So the color doesn't match on the pivot pin I did replace. It got turned on the other side of the knife. And again, my snap is a little too strong on that main blade. Again, that will wear in and be better. So those are the imperfect things that happen with a knife, but I still think it's gorgeous. And I hope the owner is very proud of it. I hope he enjoys the work that's been done, because I certainly do want to make my customers happy. Yeah, this one, it's just hard for me to imagine a knife turning out any better than this one. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something from it. I hope you have a great day, and may God bless you all. Take care. Goodbye.